Now to an inside the Beltway view of the economy and, more importantly, what to do to get us back where we should be. We're joined by Virginia Congressman Bob Good. Congressman, thank you for joining Centerpoint tonight.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So I saw recently written that our spending by the federal government has now approached what I call the fiscal speed of light, $196,000 a second, more than the 186,000 miles per second of the speed of light. I mean, that's a problem.
It's a major problem with $32 trillion in national debt, equates to almost $100,000 per citizen, about $250,000 per taxpayer. And so it is unsustainable. We've got to utilize the new Republican majority to bring fiscal sanity, fiscal solvency to the country, and we're determined to do just that.
You know, one of the things, Congressman, that I know you know so well is that when people are concerned about inflation, grocery prices, gas prices, heating and cooling their homes, this inflation is caused by actions in Washington, D.C. And so now with the new majority, it's one of your focuses to deal with it and try to get inflation under control.
Yes, three of the prongs, if you will, of the strong economy that we had under the Trump administration was affordable, reliable energy. And of course, we've declared war on American energy, and we've driven up massively energy prices, which causes everything to go up. Everything is shipped by plane, by train, by truck, or by ship. And so we've increased energy prices. We've massively overspent and flooded the economy with printed and borrowed money, which has caused inflation to go up. We didn't have inflation. It was non-existent when this president took office, 1%. Now we're enduring Jimmy Carter-like inflation, the highest inflation in 40 years, which is just crushing Americans' purchasing power. And then at the same time, you've got the interest rates have been raised, not in response to a hot economy as they historically are done. You know, you raise interest rates. The theory is to try to cool a hot economy to prevent inflation. Instead, the government has caused the inflation with the rapid, reckless spending. And then we've responded by increasing interest rates anyway, which has priced Americans out of housing and everything else that they need to finance. And so all of this is just crushing Americans' wallets, particularly fixed income Americans, senior citizens, low income individuals, and the middle class that Joe Biden claims to care about is being crushed by these policies.
You know, one of the tools that the new majority has been very vocal in saying that it intends to use is the impending debt ceiling limit and the need to increase it. You know, more than half the time since 1978, the debt ceiling increase has been paired with spending cuts. Is that something that we see on the horizon? Are we finally going to be able to get a deal on that?
Yes, the American people gave us the majority for a reason. They voted overwhelmingly for Republicans, with 3 million more votes for Republicans than Democrats in the 22 congressional elections. And it was because they wanted change in Washington. And even though we only control one house of one branch of government, we've got to utilize the power of the purse to bring change in Washington. And the first fight on the horizon isn't exactly the debt ceiling. To your point, even though the media would tell you otherwise or doesn't tell you the whole truth, the Democrats would say this is unprecedented. You're exactly right. There's been 8 times in the last 35 years or so where you've had some meaningful spending reforms, all of which were tied to a debt ceiling increase, utilizing that opportunity as leverage to do that. And we've got to do that as Republicans. We cannot be a party to raising the debt ceiling some $2 or $3 trillion, which is what the administration would like to see. And of course, they don't want to see any spending cuts or any spending reforms combined with that. What, in my view, we need to do is have a dollar for dollar cut in spending commensurate with any increase in the debt ceiling that puts us on a path to fiscal responsibility, so that theoretically, as we continue to do that, we won't need to continue to raise the debt ceiling, but instead we'll begin to cut our national debt, our annual deficit, so that we can cut the national debt, which is the highest percent of GDP that it's been since World War II.
You know, one of the things, and going back and looking through history, you know, President Obama, Vice President and Senator Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, they've all talked openly about negotiating during past debt ceiling limit increases. And now, of course, they're all on the other side. You know, do we see that there is a chance that we can get a deal done soon? Or are we going to have to do, which is something typical in Washington, kind of play that game of chicken and watch the clock run out until a deal is actually done?
Well, initially, the president was very irresponsible when he said he wasn't going to negotiate. He wasn't going to talk about any spending cuts. And he just wanted us to, he was just demanding that we raise the debt limit without any cuts in spending. And thankfully, Speaker McCarthy is doing and saying the right things, and he's keeping his promises that he made when he was voted in as Speaker. And the president did finally agree to meet with him. The president says they're going to meet again. And to your point, Joe Biden, as senator, voted against debt ceiling increases without spending reforms when he was a senator during Republican administrations. And we're going to apply that leverage of the debt ceiling. We shouldn't be afraid, quite frankly, of a government shutdown. That is not the same as a government default. We're never going to default. There is more than enough revenue. Matter of fact, we've got record revenue. We've never had $4.9 trillion coming into the Treasury like we have the last 2 years because of the Trump tax cuts, quite frankly, that have incentivized the right things. But we've got enough revenue to pay our obligations, to pay the nation's debt, so to speak, but we would just have to prioritize our spending if we were to have a government shutdown. But we're not going to have a default, and that's irresponsible of the media and the Democrats to claim that to that effect, but we shouldn't be afraid of a government shutdown.
Yeah, and just a little bit of the time that we have left, I know one thing that could be saving about $1 trillion projected would be the elimination of Joe Biden's student loan program, which appeared before the Supreme Court today. I mean, do you think that that's likely?
Well, I certainly believe that this court will find it unconstitutional for the president to just incur on his own some $500 billion worth of debt by transferring debt from those who borrowed it to the American taxpayer and adding that to the national debt. I think the Supreme Court will find that unconstitutional. But in the meantime, we can't wait on the court to do its work. We as Republicans need to insist on that and insist on eliminating Biden's student loan transfer scheme from the budget, and that's going to save about $500 billion of what is slated to be spent this year.
Congressman Bob Good from Virginia, thank you for joining Centerpoint. We hope to have you back.
Thank you. Great to be with you again.
Thank you. When we come back, 1 year later, Russia is still grinding it out in Ukraine, China threatening to help. We'll be joined by the director of the Center for Europe and Eurasia from the Hudson Institute back in 90 seconds.